Like and subscribe right now, or this spider will crawl on your face when you're sleeping.
It was 10 fascinating facts about the Titanic sinking. The Great Titanic made history forever for 2 reasons. First, it was a grand beauty to behold in every way once you saw it. Moreover, it shall be memorable for topping the lists of most horrendous wrecks. The boat went by many names, such as the Queen and the Unsinkable, among others. It pushed fate further by claiming that the boat was not sinkable, even by God. Sure enough, the owner mustn't have been aware that the ocean is a beautiful but treacherous place and was a bit too cocky. Thus, we look at the captivating facts about the Titanic sinking. Number 10. An arrogant captain. Considering how fancy the ship was, its passengers were as elegant as the ship's status. The captain began his journey from Southampton, England to New York, making short stops such as one in France. Edward Smith had been given a great task: transport over 2,000 passengers across the Great Sea. It was discovered that the captain had received several warnings over the radio. One of those caution messages came from the Atlantic Line ship, cautioning them of drifting ice that was troubling ships. This message was shrugged off, as none of the crew members nor the maritime authority saw how an iceberg could do this ship any harm. They continued on into the night, and as it neared midnight, the temperatures went to below 0 degrees and ocean waters were almost still. Lookout crewman Fredrick spotted an iceberg in the path of the ship. He rang the lookout bell 3 times and phoned the bridge to warn of the iceberg.
Is there anyone there?
Yes, what do you see?
Iceberg, right ahead!
Thank you.
The captain directed that the ship be swung away from the berg, but this didn't rescue the ship completely. The iceberg scraped the starboard, causing it to be vulnerable to water seeping into the ship. The arrogance of the captain and the crew members cost them many lives. Maybe that's why it was rumored that the captain did not attempt to save his life when the ship started to sink. His last infamous words were presumed to be to his crew members, asking them to take care of the women and children, and finally themselves. Before we move on, I've got a little challenge for you that'll take 5 seconds to complete. So here's the deal. You just leave a like on this video, smash that subscribe button, and hit the notification bell, and you will get 25 years of amazing luck. Try it really works. Number 9. The Bilge. Titanic was the largest ship afloat during its time. It was 882.5 feet long, 92.5 feet wide, and 175 feet high. When in motion, it displaced 66,000 tons of water. Before its maiden voyage from Southampton, it had newly designed watertight compartments and had remotely operated electronic, watertight doors. It was practically impenetrable. Besides, it had 2 seemingly foolproof safety factors: a double-bottom hull and her compartments. The hull was meant to protect the interior of the ship in case of any collision. As for the compartments, they were designed to divide to stop the spread of flooding. But on the 14th of April 1912, nothing that had been built could save it from sinking. At around 11:40 at night, she collided with an iceberg. Despite being designed to stay afloat on an occasion where a couple of compartments were breached, she sank rather fast. The iceberg had caused the ship's hull plates to buckle along its right side, and water filled 6 of its compartments. The iceberg had also damaged above the double bottom, and water went into the Titanic in gallons, breaking the deck floors above. The greatest design fail would have to be that the compartments weren't airtight, allowing for water to seep in from one compartment to another. Number 8. A fire broke out on the ship. In this day and age, a fire on a ship isn't a cause of alarm, as it can easily be managed and contained without it causing any harm to a modern ship, because modern ships have a double-built hull. This isn't the case for Titanic and other older ships, which were designed with only one hull. The long-withheld assumption was that an iceberg destroyed the bottom deck and was the main cause of the wreckage and sinking. Newfound evidence suggests that the bottom deck walls had already been destroyed, and implications of this ignored. Firstly, we should note that the Titanic was steam-powered, thus meaning that it used coal to fuel its operations. It required lots and lots of coal constantly being added into a furnace throughout the journey. The timing of the journey itself wasn't appropriate, as it fell on the period where there was a mining strike across the United Kingdom. However, they did manage to get just enough coal from other ships. A dark strike on the right side of the hull caught the eyes of modern analysts, and upon investigation, it was found that one of the coal bunkers was on fire just a few weeks before the voyage. Coal had been loaded onto the ship 3 weeks before the due date. This means that the ship might have been on fire since then. This might be true because coal can burn without raising any alarms for days before it leads up to a big fire that can be noticed. This was confirmed by firemen on board the Titanic. They claimed that several of them were tasked with emptying the burning coal into the furnace, and no further attempt was made to look into the damage caused. This caused the ship to move at great speed because of the continued supply of unnecessary fuel into the furnace. Later, it was noted that the steel walls had become red hot and the bulkhead was severely damaged. Unfortunately, that is the exact spot where the iceberg hit the ship, and due to the already vulnerable steel wall, might have contributed to the disaster. Number 7. Cheap, luxuriously made boat. We have talked about the structure of the Titanic and the way it's built. No one would expect that this massive ship would be made from usual steel. Rather, you'd expect that some specially manufactured steel would be used to design this glorious beauty. Well, that is far from the truth of what was used. The Titanic had 2 sister ships. The Titanic capsized like its sister while it collided into something, and the bottom hull was tremendously damaged. This has come to show that the material of steel that was being used on these ships was of very poor quality compared to the tasks it had been intended for. Number 6. Unresponsive rescue ship. It's hard to think that the grave death toll of the Titanic could have been avoided. This is because when the Titanic started sending out a distress call and lighting flares in the hope of anyone rescuing them, there was a ship sailing not too far from it. It is accurate to say that the ship's crew captain and passengers may have seen the flares, but the captain of that ship failed to answer to its distresses, claiming that he didn't understand the type of help they needed. The captain was deranged and banned from sailing as a captain. He was, however, reinstated later on. Number 5. Speed. It's still unclear whether it was the unnecessary large amounts of coal being poured into the furnace, or the pressure from the White Line Agency to make Titanic the largest and fastest ship that caused it to run so speedily. The fact is that the unneeded coal was a great contributor to the high speed of the ship. This is because the ship had nothing to do with that extra power that the burning coal was giving. The recommended speed for a ship as big as the Titanic was 18 to 21 knots. Instead, the ship was clocking 23 knots, trying to create a record never before seen. It did make a statement, but not the one intended, but it is remembered as the most gruesome shipwreckage of its time. Moving at this speed made it impossible for the ship's engines to stop to avoid the collision with the iceberg or steer the ship away from that path swiftly. Number 4. Binoculars. It's almost comical to think that on a boat that has a lavishly built swimming pool, really fine wine, and state-of-the-art rooms didn't have a pair of binoculars. Why and how would a pair of binoculars have saved this ship? Well, according to the onlooker, Mr. Fredrick Fleet, who was one of the survivors, confirms this. He states that the night was cold and foggy and it was hard seeing anything that night. This would have been made easier if they had a pair of binoculars instead of using their naked eyes to keep watch. The reason as to why they didn't have one was because one of the crew members who owned the binoculars had been transferred only recently. This sudden transfer caused him to forget to clear out his desk, which held the binoculars. Such small mistakes added up together, leading to a catastrophe. It's pretty stunning. Mr. Fleet, who survived the wreckage, didn't live a normal life after the Titanic, as he fell into depression in the later years of his life. Number 3. Ignorance. The ship's captain didn't call in for help until about an hour after they had collided with the iceberg. Is it possible that if they had called in earlier, more lives would have been saved? We will unfortunately never get to know what would have happened. It is evident, however, that everyone on board and off board that ship had great faith in the capabilities it withheld. They surely believed that it was unsinkable until their drowning deaths. And with that, it's now time for today's best pick. Today's photo was sent to us by a subscriber, so if you come across a photo online and want to know more details about it, just send it over to us. We might even feature it on our future video. Number 2. Lifeboats on deck. Although the Titanic could carry about 60 lifeboats on deck due to its passenger loading size, it had only 20. When investigated further, it was found that the reason as to why it didn't carry its full capacity of lifeboats was found to be optics. The passengers' clientele felt that the many boats would obscure the beautiful water view that they wanted to enjoy. This suggested that the ones there truly believed that the ship was unsinkable. Additionally, they hired members who lacked basic lifeboat training and didn't know how to handle the situation when the ship started sinking. The men failed to fill the first boats to capacity and only carried 16 people. Some capsized with the ship, and a number were shot by ship authorities when panic grew and everyone tried to hop into a boat to safety. Number 1. Late call. The captain of the Titanic only called for help when it was only too late for anyone to rescue a good amount of them. They had some sense of self-confidence in the boat being indestructible. Thus, they didn't think that any help was needed and the ship wasn't sinking. In the last few minutes, the crew went up to the upper decks, urging passengers to put on their life jackets. Some even dared not getting into lifeboats, still holding on to the faith of an unsinkable sinking ship.